Hello, everybody. Welcome to Late Night News. I am Joe Compton, and with me, as always,
I'm Venessa Giunta. Hello, everyone.
welcome to
Happy
our dark cloud.
Friday.
Welcome to our dark cloud episode. Uh,
Yes.
and unfortunately, yeah, we're gonna start off with some really bad news, and then some not
And then more
surprisingly
bad
bad
news.
news.
Yeah, not surprisingly bad news, but yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Well,
but welcome in, everybody.
yeah.
Buckle
Nice
up.
to see
Here we
everybody.
go.
Hi, Anita. Nice to see you.
Hey, Nina.
But yeah, so I wanted to mention on this show, I will be mentioning it on Sunday as well because I'm hosting This Week in Indies. But unfortunately, we lost a pretty significant person within our community. Somebody who was really a pioneer in the horror industry for a very long time, and somebody who I've actually interacted with and talked to before. And unfortunately, uh, Nancy Kilpatrick passed away earlier this week, and I just wanted to take this moment to talk a little bit about Nancy. She was an award-winning writer and editor who published 23 novels, 2 novellas, 1 nonfiction book, and 250 short stories, and 9 collections of her short fiction, plus comic books, graphic novels. She edited a bunch of anthologies. She has co-written 1 stage play, penned many nonfiction articles and reviews, and her work has been translated into 8 languages. Her writing and editing falls into the dark fantasy, horror, mystery, erotic horror, sci-fi. She writes under her own name, plus 2 pen names in Amrithra Knight and Desire Knight, um, which she claims is Amrithra's kid sister, which I always thought was funny. Nancy has been a 4-time Bram Stoker finalist, a 7-time Aurora Award finalist, and a 2-time Paris Book Festival winner for her anthologies. The Forward Reviewers Award Silver winner for collections, the winner of the Murder, Mayhem, and Macabre Award, the Standing Stone Short Fiction winner, and Inner Zone winner, and winner of the Arthur Ellis Award for Best Mystery Stories. Her series Thrones of Blood was optioned for TV and film, and her previous novel to that, Near Death, was twice optioned before. Uh, I actually had the very pleasure of speaking with Nancy at when I went to Words Collide in Calgary a few years ago, and I met her. She was sitting at the table that we were all at, and we had a nice conversation about horror and where it's going. And we were planning an interview at the next year, but she got COVID or something. She didn't come to the next Words Collide, so I didn't get to sit down with her and talk, which is unfortunate because that would have been nice to have an interview with her about all the stuff. But I mean, when it comes to Canadian horror writers, she was the cream of the crop. I mean, 4 Bram Stoker
Yeah.
awards, that's amazing, and seven
Yeah.
Aurora Awards, which is the big award in Canada for authors. So that's a really big deal, and so she's going to be very, very sorely missed for sure.
Yeah. I met her briefly I don't remember if it was the first Stoker Con or if it was the HWA convention, one of those that was before StokerCon. But I did. We were sitting like with a group of people, and she was just so. I mean, I was just a baby writer at the time, and she was just so. She just had so much grace to her.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? She was kind and encouraging, and yeah, we've lost an icon basically.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So.
She actually signed an autograph at the table we were sitting at, which was kind of. She was so surprised by that. Like somebody came up and asked her if
Ah,
they would sign her. They had a copy of Near Death and asked her to sign it, and she said, "Oh yeah, sure, no
oh,
problem." Yeah, it was really cute.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
but yeah, definitely she'll be sorely missed. And sorry to start off on such a somber note, but I thought it was important to acknowledge Nancy because she was very important in our community and very important to the horror community, especially. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh,
thank you for indulging us with that. And now we're going to give you some even worse news. Well, not worse news, probably
well, not
better news.
worse.
But
Yeah.
It is.
Also death. Yeah, so our top story tonight is the death of National Novel Writing Month, which which would have celebrated its 25th anniversary this year. NaNoWriMo leadership sent out an email earlier this week letting members know that the nonprofit is shutting down. The primary reason is financial, with the 5013C charity citing a drop in community support and a rise in operating expenses, especially staff salaries. In the email, as well as an accompanying video by Kilby Blake, who is the interim executive director, they stated that Nano has not been financially solvent since 2017 and had a particularly tumultuous year in 2023. If you're a regular viewer of late night news, you might recall that we did a story on National Novel Writing Month in 2024, covering all of the controversy from 2023 and 2024, from the charges of child endangerment to the treatment of local volunteers, and then finally to Nano's embrace of AI, which seemed to be the final straw in terms of community goodwill. To give a quick rundown, in 2023, allegations of a young writers program moderator grooming kids and moving them to an off-Nano website to continue the process, those allegations became public. This mod had been reported to the Nano staff, who did nothing about it. The matter came to the attention of the NaNoWriMo board after community outcry. When the mod was ultimately removed, it was for an entirely different reason. According to the video released this week, upon the board's investigation, they found that not only did none of the volunteers associated with the Young Writers Program have any child safety training, but background checks were not even done before allowing a volunteer to work with the children in the program. And further, the organization had no steps in place to require even a legal name from these volunteers. Like, all they had was a screen name. When the police requested information about that particular mod, NaNoWriMo had no information to give them. So after fixing these important insights, and I do want to be clear that there's a difference between NaNoWriMo staff and the NaNoWriMo board. By all, the board didn't know anything about it until either right after or right before it became public. But the staff had gotten the initial complaints several months prior to that. So after fixing these important oversights, including doing the background checks, getting state mandated, child safety training for all the volunteers, and separating out the Young Writers Program from the Adult Access Program, and giving them their own space, creating more controls over who children could interact with on the site, all of that sort of thing. NaNoWriMo ran headfirst into its next issue, which was transparency. They issued a series of edicts to the non-paid staff, the municipal liaisons, so the people who run the boots on the ground local events. So they issued a series of edicts to those folks without giving any explanations, without answering any questions, without getting any feedback from the people who would be affected, without explaining their reasoning. This led to a large number of those boots on the ground local organizers to just up and quit. And these are people who had been with Nano for 10, 15, 20 years in some cases. Then finally, yes, Anita, the board did try, but too much damage was done by the staff by the time they stepped in. Yes, it was already completely out of control and awful. So finally, this past year, 2024, just before the November National Novel Writing event happened, the organization announced that AI would be allowed for those who were participating. They would be allowed to use AI on their writing. Tied to the writerly community, this felt very much like the absolute final straw for
Mm,
Nano. It's really not rocket science to understand why donations were down. It's not difficult to work out why the community has abandoned what used to be an incredibly beloved event, even
mhm.
if it was always at a challenging time of year. I am sad that Nano has fallen. The saving grace is that it's a lot easier now for authors to find writing groups to join. It's easier than it was in 1999 when
Mhm.
Nano began. But this is just like, it's not unexpected, but it is still a huge disappointment, I think.
Yeah. I think it all fell apart when they lost their grassroots sentiment. You know, when they lost all of the administrators and were really
Yeah,
terrible
all the
to.
MLs.
Yeah, once
Yeah,
that happened, this thing was going to unwind quickly and fast and just
yeah. I
disintegrate.
feel like they could have even bounced back had they made good decisions after that. But the AI thing, that was it. That was
Yeah,
it. Like, I feel like, and I know for me, that was just like throw my hands in the air. I'm done. I'm done.
yeah,
You know, you have used all my goodwill.
yeah. I came across this, which is their reasonings for first their advice for anybody starting a nonprofit who wants to do something the scale of NaNoWriMo, which of course that's like getting advice, that's bad to begin with, and then what's next for the people were involved in NaNoWriMo, which is nothing. They
Mhm.
basically said nothing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
They've
but
said that they will keep the website open for as long as they can, but if you have anything up there that you want, like your statistics or anything like that, you're going to want to pull them down. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
uh, I
the
mean,
AI debacle was the last. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, the first thing when the board, with the child endangerment, with the predator in the group, when the board stepped in, like they did, they created policies that
yeah,
would keep that from happening. It would be significantly more difficult for
yeah,
someone to take advantage in the way this man did.
yeah,
So, but like, so after that, like they came in, okay, all right, because so much of people's goodwill toward you has to do with how you react to a problem or a mistake or something unintended that happened. Like, so much of it is how you react to that. And I felt like the board did take steps. I mean, they didn't know that you don't know what you don't know, and they didn't know. Staff was useless, but the board stepped in, made a lot of changes. The entire I think almost the entire board stepped down, and other people stepped in, and that sort of thing. But then when they were screwing around with the MLs, I mean, we had a whole big long piece on that part,
yeah,
especially. It was the way they treated their volunteers with such disdain, because that's what it felt like. It was
yeah,
condescension and disdain, you know?
yeah. I think this is an organization who grew too fast, too strong, too fast, too too strong, too fast, and really was too big for the people who were involved to handle it. And then when things started to happen, they got a bunch of people who tried to triage it, but it was just so out of the realm of control at that point. It was impossible to do that, and
I
it's
think after
unfortunate.
the child endangerment thing, it became about circling the wagons.
Yeah,
Became about damage control. Like, so the next thing that happened, with the thing with the MLs was completely preventable.
yeah,
Like, it was a problem of their own making. If
yeah,
they had just handled it differently, they probably wouldn't have had. I mean, yes, there would have been people who would have, said, no, I don't want to do that or whatever. But if they had been treated with respect and with the understanding that the MLs, are the people who actually run Nano,
yeah,
they're the ones who actually run this this organization, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that the people who were at the top and making the decisions forgot that. And the interesting thing, and we talked about this a little bit before, is the video and like those screenshots that you put up. It's very much about the community didn't support us enough, and
Yeah.
it's not our fault. And it's like, no, it is your fault because
Yeah.
you're the
Take some personal
leaders.
responsibility. Yeah.
You're the leaders. It's like where you lead is where the organization goes.
Yeah.
You failed. That's it, right? And it was interesting because I was actually looking at some of the numbers, the actual financial numbers, because they were solvent in 2017. They were not solvent in 2018, 2019. In 2020, they were solvent only because they got a COVID loan, and the same with 2021. And then they were, but the interesting thing is between 2017 when they were solvent and 2018 when they were not, there was an interesting thing with the numbers. And I don't know if this is just something that they had to do for tax purposes or accounting or what, but in 2017, they had something like $1 million for the program,
Mm-hmm.
and then 87,000 for, and it was termed as management. But then in 2018, programming was just a small amount, and salaries and staff became like 800,000, like almost 900,000. So I don't know if they originally included staff who run the programs in the program part,
Mm.
and then they had to divide it up because there was a problem with like filing taxes or whatever. I don't know how, but correlation is not causation, obviously,
Yeah.
but whatever happened that year, that was a major change in the way they were declaring their funds. And again, I don't know it. I mean, obviously they happened at the same time. I don't know if
Yeah.
one is related to the other in any kind of causal way, but there were definitely changes from 2017 to 2018 in terms of how the money was handled.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
yeah,
in
they
the end
broke
says they
trust
broke
with the
trust with you.
yes. Yes. The only way you can come back from breaking trust is by acknowledging, taking responsibility for your actions, and then changing things so that that doesn't happen again. And that's not what they did.
And TWT did an alternative version of a spin-off
Yes.
of
We did
NaNoWriMo
Wham.
last year, Wham. And
Yeah, writing hard all month, which can
yeah,
be done any month.
right. But I really, I especially think that that's interesting because I think you're going to see a lot of offshoots and people trying to do something like this. I
Yeah,
don't know you'll ever get to the scale that NaNoWriMo was at
I
ever
don't want to get
again.
that scale. That's
Yeah,
too big. It's too
maybe
much.
maybe it's a cautionary tale too. But I just feel like I mean NaNoWriMo was a polarizing thing to begin with. When I first started, it was fashionable almost, and then it became more polarizing. Like you became like drawn on a line that like kind of where we are in politics now, where you're kind of either you hate it or you love it kind of thing, right? And you were all in or you were all out, and you were really aggressively all out if you were all out, like vehemently spitting fire against it, and so it just kind of reeks of this idea that is this where we're headed in our world right now? Because this is kind of an offshoot of that idea, right? And it's just
Mhm.
it's scary. It's tough, but I think that people were leaning on it a lot more than they should have been, right? And I don't know. It just seems
I mean,
I don't
to
know. There's
me, no, go
yeah. Go,
ahead. I'm sorry.
no. I'm done.
Okay, I was just going to say the thing is, and I think it's interesting that you make the observation about how our at least our country in the United States
Yeah.
and in other places, but obviously we are U.S. centric, you and I, because this is where
Yeah.
we live. But I think it's really interesting that you make that observation that we're kind of going in that direction, because it feels like people are identifying with the thing. And
Yeah.
if you like whatever that is, a political party, a TV show, nano,
Yeah.
they start identifying with the thing. So if someone is critical of the thing, it becomes a personal attack, right? And
Yeah.
for me, I did nano most years. I didn't always win. I probably only won about maybe 40% of the time.
Mm.
But I didn't view it as like, I viewed it as an amazing tool that I can utilize. That's
Sure.
how I always looked at it. I wrote the most in November most years, not every year, but most years. I wrote the most in November. So that might, like, for many years, that was the year I would write my book. I would write my book in November, and then I'd figure out how to finish it or not. In some cases, later, you know what I mean? But I would write
Yeah.
those 50,000 words because all of a sudden you had this built-in, you know, support group and all that kind of stuff, right? This was before I created the writers troupe. You had this built in, and I had gone to grad school for writing. I did Seton Hill's writing popular fiction program, which is genre focused, not literary focused. And that was the most intensive thing I'd ever been through, right? So I'd done nano before that, and I continued to do nano after that, because in part too, because I was looking for that kind of support. And
Sure.
it was an incredible tool,
Yeah.
right? And even last year you were saying how it's going to, people are going to kind of break off, and they'd already started doing it last year. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we did, the
Right.
writers troupe did, when we did wham, instead of nano, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's already happening, I think. um
Anita
ah
said she won all the ones she participated in, which surprised her. Yeah. I
It does
mean,
not surprise me at all, Anita, not even a little bit.
I don't know. I've never been competitive about my writing, so it really never.
That's not how I saw it. I didn't see it
Yeah.
as competitive with other people. It
Yeah.
was a tool that I could use to motivate myself to do the work as
Yeah.
quickly as I could.
No,
Like, it was a tool for me. And there
yeah.
were years that I started it where I knew I wouldn't get to 50,000 words. It didn't matter, because it was like, if I got 20,000 words, if I got 10,000 words,
Yeah.
that was great. It's fine. It's like, whatever. That's how I viewed it. I didn't view it as, oh, I'm competing against you or you or
Right.
you. Like, that's not how it ever to
Yeah.
me, you know?
I think there's merit in the way that it's designed to get you going and do the things you need to
Yeah.
do, but you know, I also think that you can self motivate yourself to do that anytime. It doesn't have to be in November, but I mean,
It doesn't have to be in November, but when there's already a bunch of people doing it, that
right,
also gives you motivation,
right,
right?
and it
And
also
not
gives you
all of us
comfort,
are self-motivated.
right?
Like, I am definitely not self-motivated, as you probably should know by now. I
I,
mean, I
I'm there with you, and I think there is a comfort in that. In that, that people are going to be writing during that time period, so you can get into it, right? Kind of idea, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know, it's this disorganization of this entire organization was kind of just
Well,
fraught
I
with
mean,
disaster. You
I
know?
was I think, okay, so I started doing nano in the early aughts. Like, it was probably like 2005 or something like that when I
Mm,
started doing it. Maybe not even, it might have even been before that. It was definitely after 2000, but definitely before. Well, actually, it probably was like 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, right?
mhm.
And it was amazing, because you could, like, go to a place, so you go to a
Yeah,
coffee shop and there are other writers there. And that was not a thing that was
yeah,
common back then,
yeah,
right? And I was a
yeah.
baby writer. I had never written a book before. Didn't know what the fuck I was doing, right? But there are all these people who had done this before. And, when I would be like, oh my God, it's day 10 and I'm already like 3,000 words behind. What am I supposed to do? Then you get all these people cheering for you. I think National Novel Writing Month at its base, at its core, is an amazing thing. It is an
Yeah.
amazing, like how many published authors are out there who would not have ever finished a book
Yeah.
if it weren't for Nano?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but I think where things become problematic, and I believe this about business as well, and I believe this about government, I believe this about any group of human beings, is that when a community gets too big,
Mm-hmm.
you can't, you lose it. You lose
Yeah.
what made it magical to begin with. I think Nano was trying to keep that, and I think they did a good job for a while.
Mm.
And what they needed to continue to do was really pour all their resources into the local groups.
Yeah.
That's where all of it should go. We didn't
That was
need
the
a
biggest.
CFO or
That
all
was the
of that.
biggest
We
misstep.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It started, and I feel like they didn't have a concrete plan. Like,
Yeah.
it's great. Like, I think the Young Writers program was fabulous. I mean, aside from the predators, let's just assume that I don't mean that. But
Yeah.
like, like encouraging children to write,
Yeah.
and showing them their worth, that their words are worth something. That is amazing, I think. But I don't know that they had a really set plan on where they were going, where they wanted to go.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, Anita says I finished 3 books and a short story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I do believe in the motivation. I do think it's a wonderful community aspect to it.
Mhm.
But I think that the organization itself was fraught with disaster because it just didn't acknowledge that where its strengths lied, and they kind of ignored that and kind of got a little too greedy, and that happens. It's what happens.
Greedy. I don't know about greedy because, like, so one of
Well,
the things I looked at.
you had mentioned the change in the numbers there. That kind of
Right. But I'd also note though that the people who were like what we would consider the C-suite, if it were an actual business and not a
Mhm.
nonprofit, but like the guy at the top, the CEO guy, he was only getting, I say only, it was like 120,000 a year, but
Mm.
that is like a quarter of what he would have made if he'd been in like the tech sector or whatever, the private sector.
Yeah,
And so, like, do I think that they probably wasted some of their money? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I would say greed. It maybe, I don't know
and greed has
I mean,
different
it's easy
forms.
to assume.
Yeah, greed has different
It's
forms. It
easy
doesn't.
to assume that.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead, I'm
mean,
sorry.
greed has different forms. It doesn't necessarily mean money. It could be. You could feel powerful. You could feel like you had some kind of
Sure.
say in like the inner circles of the inner circles. Things like that, and that also could have reared its ugly head here. I don't know,
Absolutely.
but
I mean, we can't know those things,
yeah,
right? We can't know. And I
but it
I
feels
try
like
really hard. I mean, they definitely made missteps. They made bad decisions,
yeah,
and that's the whole thing. They made too many bad decisions in a row,
yeah,
and that will kill any organization. You have to be able to bounce back from your bad decisions, and they just weren't. They just kept making bad decisions. And that ultimately, I think, is what killed them, because
absolutely.
we couldn't trust them anymore. Just like Anita said, they
Mhm.
lost the trust of the community.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's a shame.
yeah, and another bad decision you might make is not listening to CL Cannon's marketing tip when it's on the screen, because she's got a good one this week or this month or this episode and this month, and she's helping you with getting the reader experience into shape. So this is going to be a really good one.
Yes,
Everybody, check it out, and then we'll be back to talk. I think we're gonna pivot a little bit into a little less darkness, but we'll.
sure. Thank goodness.
But yeah, here's CL Cannon. We'll be right back after that.
Hey guys, CL Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another monthly marketing tip. and today I want to talk to you about cultivating a good reader experience and how that can help you sell more books. As authors, we want to make sure that our readers have the best time reading our books, that they remember us and the stories that we tell with fondness, and that they recommend the book to others so we can grow our readership. And while telling a story that touches every person who picks it up is nearly impossible, since reading is subjective and very personal, but there are areas of the publishing process that we do have more direct control over, and handling these areas with care can lead to more positive experiences. So I'm going to go over what I believe to be some of the most important areas in this video. Okay, let's talk about cover. Having a pretty cover is all well and good, and it's true that your book's cover is one of the most effective marketing tools that you have. So making sure that your cover conveys the right message is just as important as how pretty it is. Readers look for specific fonts, imagery, and even color patterns when they're shopping for new books. This is mostly a subconscious thing, but making sure that your cover conveys key elements of other books in your genre is the best way to make sure that your book is picked up by the right readers, and that when a reader does pick up your book, the story is what they expect it to be. No one wants to pick up an epic fantasy and get a very thriller, or pick up a rom-com with like a cartoon cover and get horror instead. This is why these matter. So before deciding on a design for your book, map out all the key elements of your story and your genre and explore what other best-selling books with those elements have in common when it comes to cover design. That is also why choosing the right designer is so important. Find someone with experience, who knows the genre norms, and who can help guide you to a best-selling cover that meets reader expectations. Next is editing. No book can be completely free of errors, but ensuring your book has been edited by a professional and then looked over by several more eyes then is the best way to combat errors that could pull a reader out of the story or even make them put the book down. You don't have to spend tons of money. I know not everyone can afford a developmental editor or 20 rounds of edits, but I do suggest a copy editor or a line editor. You can use tools like Grammarly, ProWriting Aid, or the built-in spell check programs to pre-edit your book. Never, ever, ever send your book out to an editor without pre-editing. Some authors print out their story and they go over the print version with like a red pen. You can use the read aloud function to catch typos and errors. You can ask your alpha and beta readers to highlight problems for you. So the more eyes that you get on it, the better. The more you pre-edit your story, the cheaper your professional editing quote is likely to be, since most editors base their pricing on how clean the manuscript is in the first place. This also allows your editor to focus less on cleaning up basic errors like typos and grammar, and more time making your story the best that it can be. Of course, no matter how many eyes you have on it, there will always, always, always be a couple of errors that just slip through somehow. It's like magic. It happens every time. It even happens to traditionally published books, so don't sweat it. I actually include a note inside of my books with an email address where readers can submit their errors they find, and I can fix those and update the manuscript as quickly as possible and not have them reporting them to Amazon, which can get really annoying. All in all, it's worth the extra time spent to ensure your reader has a positive reading experience and that they can focus on your story and not all the times your fingers betrayed you and added an extra Y to something. Now let's talk about formatting. Formatting is something that I think a lot of authors, but it is in fact a huge deal. There's nothing that will make me buy a book quicker than seeing some fancy chapter headers, art, maps, elegant dividers. I'm a sucker for all those things. So while that's not a requirement for a good reader experience, it certainly helps endear print books to a reader and especially a collector like me. There are several ways to format, and no one way is better than others as long as you know what you're doing and as long as you thoroughly test your results for multiple scenarios. I personally, and I adore it. It is my favorite. It's quick. There's lots of standard features to choose from. It already handles all the accessibility issues for me by offering a limited number of fonts and presets that have been tested. No matter what program you use though, or how fancy you get with your design, you want to use fonts that are big enough for most people to read, fonts that have been licensed and can be embedded into your final files. And for ebooks, you want to make sure that your text, your pictures, dividers, and all of that are reflowable, they're properly sized, they have the proper DPI, and that they're able to be viewed in both light and dark modes, because no matter what you pick out, ebook features are controlled by the reader. A lot of people forget that. They're controlled by the reader and the device that the reader is using. It's also good to keep in mind that sighted people, they aren't the only people who are reading your ebooks. Provide alternative text for your images. Include a table of contents with linked chapters and subheadings. No matter who is reading it. I talked about testing your ebook. You can do this by using Calibri, which is for Windows, Mac, whatever. You can preview the book on multiple devices, and you can troubleshoot any problem areas. The last thing, you have to troubleshoot a technical problem while they're reading your book. And if there are too many issues, they're just going to give up and they're going to put it down altogether. And finally, let's talk about marketing. Marketing for your book will vary by your genre, your platform, and your comfort level. But marketing a book in a misleading or an incorrect way can have a big impact on the reader experience and ultimately the reviews. If you've sold the reader a story about a forbidden romance and an epic journey, but what's inside the pages of your book doesn't exactly fit that description, they're going to be disappointed. I can think of a really good example of this. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black is often marketed as like a fantasy enemies to lovers story, when in actuality, it does have some of those elements, but it's much more a political fantasy about a girl who's been forced into a life that she didn't choose and how she takes her power back to become the queen of Elfham. I've seen many readers who are looking for a high-stakes rival romance and who are disappointed when the romance in that story wasn't the main focus. I was pleased. I was pleasantly surprised because I loved it because both of those things are my cup of tea. Exception and not the rule here. So we have to be very intentional with the ways that we describe our stories when we market them. And even when we're talking about comparable titles that we offer up to entice readers to read our stories. Because no one wants to be misled, especially not when they're investing their hard-earned money into something that they bought to entertain themselves. Okay, that's my marketing tip for March. I hope it helps you find ways to improve the experience for your readers. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about today's tip or marketing in general. You can email me at info@fiction-atlas.com with your questions, or you can check me out on the websites that are listed below. I hope you have a lovely month, and I will see you next time. Bye!
That
Yeah.
audio got all messed up.
Yeah, it was definitely off. I don't know what happened there. Sorry, everybody. I don't know if it was a StreamYard issue or if it was a load up issue, but
It's fine.
yeah, it's my fault. You can just blame me. But yeah, sorry about that. I mean, the information was still there, and that's all that matters. So,
Good info.
and it was really good info. I believe that Anita had a comment during it too. She said that my current beta readers have given a lot of editing tweaks to do. So yeah,
Beta readers are worth their weight in gold, man. For real.
totally.
You get good ones, hold on to them.
Absolutely. All right. So, we often have a lot of stories here where we crap on the big five quite a bit and like to make fun of them and kind of like to, thumb our noses at them. I don't know what to tell you, Uncle Stephen. It happens, but, but we also, I think it'd be fair to give credit where credit is due when they're doing something that's really nice and really right. And there's two stories here that have kind of combined into one where it involves basically all of the big publishers for the most part participating. And the first one is about four of the five big publishers, Hachette, Macmillan, Penguin, and Simon & Schuster getting together and with source books, and they sent a letter to Congress on April 3rd expressing their deep concern over the state of the nation's libraries following a week of unprecedented turmoil at the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the agency responsible for distributing federal funding to libraries. The letter, sent in advance of the American Library Association's annual National Library Week, calls on Congress to reject the executive order signed by President Donald Trump on March 14th, which called for the elimination of IMLS to maximum extent consistent with applicable law. Since this order was issued, the Trump administration has installed a new acting director of IMLS, Deputy Secretary of Labor Keith Sonderling, who has put the institution's entire staff on administrative leave against the wishes of its advisory board. The letter comes on the same day that the library advocacy nonprofit Every Library announced in its statement that libraries across the country began receiving official notices from Sonderling terminating their grants effective April 1st. Those grants are funded by $294.8 million appropriated by Congress. A bipartisan group of 4 senators pointed out to the acting director in a March 26 memo, which was sent to remind the administration of the obligation to faithfully execute the provisions of the law as authorized, an obligation that is now going unfulfilled. Terminating these grants appears to have exceeded the plain terms of the executive order. All of these grants are statutory obligations of the agency, Every Library wrote in its statement, noting that one/programs, grants to the states, is a single largest source of federal library funding, distributing over $180 million annually to every state and territory library administration agency. Every library said that the sudden termination of these grant agreements directly violates the agency's legal responsibilities under federal law and will create a sudden significant shortfalls in nearly every state library budget. In their own letter, the publishers asserted defunding the libraries would result in mass closures and destruction of a system that today benefits millions of Americans. It is not even 0.00.3, or excuse me, 0.003% of the overall budget that has been a big topic of discussion on the Hill lately. These programs, they fund so much, and they help so many people be part of the library system, and especially indie authors, because that gives them an opportunity to bring them in to do classes for people and talk about their
book
books.
signings, and yes,
absolutely, and that's all part of that program. So it's a big deal, and good on the publishers who have been known to kind of stick it to the libraries. So this is really nice to see that they're kind of with them and standing by them a little bit here. So.
Yeah, they're set to lose a lot of money because the libraries pay them a lot of money,
right?
Because it comes out of the federal funding. But this is just, I don't know if you want me to get into this. Remember, I told you I am in my feral feminine rage stage of life. So I have feelings about all of this. I have thoughts. I have opinions.
Well,
I mean, it's part of the greater push to create a more ignorant and thus more easily manipulated populace.
Yes, absolutely, 1,000%. And this also is becoming the challenge to free expression and freedom to read, and it shows no signs of abating. So Penguin Random House and National Coalition Against Censorship have announced separate funding efforts to counter these threats. The program that the Penguin Random House is first ever banned on the Run 5K, the proceeds from which will be donated to the Freedom to Read Foundation. Within 12 hours of registration opening on March 25th, the company said Penguin Random House and Source Books employees have raised over $10,000 for this foundation. And as of press time of this article, the total climbed to more than 17,000. The fundraising will continue through the end of National Library Week, which runs April 6th to April 12th. And there's an in-person run walk event for New York-based employees at the company headquarters on April 9th, and which is all great. And the Band on Run was conceived by Philip Stamper Haplin, director of the Author of Development at Penguin Random House and a member of the publishing's Intellectual Freedom Task Force. He says, as a band author himself, he spent many years hearing often marginalized kids and teens tell their stories about how the book banning crisis has negatively impacted their lives. Stamper Haplin said in a statement, there's such a hunger out there to help fight book bans from inside and outside the industry, but people don't often know how they can make a difference. I want to give Penguin Random House and Source Books employees a chance to make that impact. Deborah Caldwell Stone, the executive director of the Freedom to Read Foundation, said the funds given by the participants will allow the Freedom to Read Foundation to continue to go to court and oppose legislation that removes books from library and bookstore shelves and vilifies librarians for providing the books to people who need them. This ban on Run is only open to the staffs of these Penguin Random House and source books, but organizers hope to expand the fundraising initiative in the future to authors, librarians, teachers, and publishing professionals. So keep your eyes out for that, everybody. For its part, the NCAC is turning to comedy to raise funds to back its efforts in support of the right to freedom expression. The Stand Up for Free Speech Comedy Benefit, which will take place on April 30th at the Gotham Comedy Club in New York, has tickets available for $45 for anybody in the area. The event is hosted by the board member and Emmy Award-winning comedian Judy Gold, who will have feature performances from comedians Alex English, Mark Normand, Jessica Curson, and Adam Ferreira. Some really heavyweights there in comedy. The funds raised for the event will directly support our fight to ensure every voice, no matter how controversial or challenging, can be heard. We are thrilled to bring together some of the most fearless voices in stand-up to celebrate the power of humor. This is when I think powerful organizations really thrive and really show you their true colors. And I love this. I love everything about this. I love the effort that they're putting into it, and it makes me happy to be a part of the publishing community. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
They do such heinous things for profit and such awful things for
Always nice
marginalizing.
when their profit, when their money grubbing hands and their money grubbing ideals coincide with better angels, and they can actually do something that is of benefit to more than just their stockholders.
But
So
this is the idea, though. What I really love about this in particular is that these organizations are big enough to take on the fight, right? And they're able to withstand all the blows that will be coming their way for this stance.
Mm-hmm.
And because they are big organizations and they have money behind them, they have people behind them, they have heavyweight authors, heavyweight comedians, heavyweight people who can fight for this and make a difference with their 1 million followers on social media and all these things. And I think that when organizations like this do this, it is amazing. And I think I would love to see, again, there's plenty of big organizations within our indie community that can rally behind this and I think push the envelope even further for the indie community. And I'd love to, I like telling these stories because I think that it is an example of what can be done right in our community as well. And so,
I agree. Oh, hello, Heather.
Hi, Heather. Nice to see you.
But yeah, that's a good opportunity to tell people not to forget to like this video and comment and subscribe and all those things. Although most people in here are already subscribed. I get that. Anyway, okay, sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, so that's how I feel about that. So I really thought that was an important story to tell tonight because I think it was very doomy and gloomy.
Yes.
And we can't say that we didn't see this coming. We called it probably the second time NaNoWriMo screwed up. We called it, I think, and then the AI thing was like, okay, it was.
It's a shame. It's really a shame. I personally am very saddened by the death of National Novel Writing Month. Yeah. Again, it was not the ideal month for most people. It was definitely a good month for college students, which obviously Chris Beatty was one when he started the organization. Yeah. It was great because you had the whole last week off. So, but when you're a functioning adult outside of the education system, that's not as convenient. But I am really genuinely sad that it's gone. I really am, because if you think about it, they've been around 25 years. They've been around. They were around before I even decided I wanted to start writing for serious. You know what I mean? So they
were around before Kindle started to change the business.
Right? Exactly. So it's like it's like something that has been a mainstay of my writerly life. Even if I wasn't participating that year, or even if I was participating and knew I wouldn't be able to win, it was still always there. That's what November was, and everybody in the family knew, leave Venessa alone in November. Don't expect her to be making no big dinners. That ain't gonna happen. Not that anybody expected that of me anyway. I definitely trained them. I've never made a turkey in my life, so I definitely trained them not to expect that kind of thing. But they had to, like they knew if they called me and I didn't pick up, don't freak out, right? Yeah, I did so much during Nano and I love them for that. Exactly. It was such a mainstay of my writerly life, my entire writerly life. Because before, like I said, it had already started by the time I decided I was going to stop being scared and I was going to actually try to write something for real, and so it's just sad. It's really sad. I'm
It is.
sad for it.
It is sad because it's a program that worked so well for so many people, as you so eloquently pointed out, and what James said. It was so important to them in that aspect of it, and I think like there'll never be something like it again. It just won't happen.
I mean, of course not. But I mean, it's just like you can never go backwards, right?
Right.
No, there's not ever going to be anything like it again. There'll be other things though, but it's still November was only a problem for people in the US. I don't know. I feel like I think what made it ideal for college students is that they are off for that last week of November for the holiday. And so I think any month you have it in is never going to be ideal for adults because, we've got jobs and we've got some people have kids and responsibilities and stuff. So I think it's not necessarily the difference between countries because obviously obviously in the US we do have a big holiday that month, but a lot of months have big holidays. So, it's like I don't think it's a US versus non-US thing. I think it really is more like college mentality versus paying all the bills adult mentality, right?
Yeah,
And
there was
not necessarily mentality, but life, you know?
there was a study done about 4 or 5 years ago about how nano has spread so far out that the U.S. was actually one of the few places that was not participating as actively as like Australia and
Oh
Japan,
wow. In
and
like a
so
per capita type
yeah,
thing.
yeah. So
Yeah,
they
that's
so
interesting.
this was a very embraced worldwide concept that I
Mhm.
think
Yeah,
you get very few
absolutely.
of those in your lifetime you ever see.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and
So
it's
yeah,
just
it was
shame.
definitely a thing.
Yeah. Uh, you know, uh, we have a little bit of time here, so I just want to mention that here on Going You Now, we are shining some light on some new stuff this week. So,
I need
um,
to AFK.
so uh, uh, but that being said, yeah, this is Bob Magoo's shirt from his novels, and he has a new show for us called Page Numbers, which is uh, declaring transparency among authors and creatives, and showing what it takes, what it really means to be in this business, and hustle and the hustle and the grind of it, and everything of that nature. It's all about the numbers game and how so I apologize for that. But that being said, the show will be out on Monday at 8 p.m. We'll make its debut. And then we have First Time for Everything, which continues on. That's Juliet Rose's show. Her 4th episode with the awesome Mark Watson will happen on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we have a brand new show with A.F. Stewart, who's in our audience. And it's Trope or Not to Trope. And that's going to be a really great show. It's basically A.F. Stewart's inviting and a member of the community, of our community, to come and pick a they've picked a trope. Oh, let me do this. They picked a trope, and the person that is the guest gets to choose whether they're going to defend the trope or they're going to fight against the trope. And Anita will then take the opposite view, and they will debate each other for the hour about that trope. And we'll find out how you feel about that trope at the end of that hour. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That debuts on Wednesday night. It's once a month. It'll be the first Wednesday of every month. So definitely want to check that out as well. Yeah, that's what we've got going on. While I was doing that, James says at the same time, it feels like the organization had was not what it needed to be anymore. It feels almost like the Rainbow Bridge Crossing. A lot of love for what it was. Awesome.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that actually really encapsulates kind of our views, because it feels like your view, Joe, is the organization as it is now. And my view is a little more nostalgic.
Yeah.
It's like, but it was so good when it was good.
I have no problem with it. I don't have any problem with the nostalgia. I too feel that. It's just
but that's not who they are now, right?
When you become professional, NaNoWriMo becomes part of your existence. And it's nice to have that motivation. But also the internet's changed that game a little bit too for you, because there's groups out there that you can, and sprints you can do any day of the week, especially on TWT, which is what we do.
The Writers Troop. Let's do the thing, yes.
So everybody, go check out the Writers Troop if you haven't, because that's where you get all the great opportunities to write, very similar to NaNoWriMo, which is great and well earned, but also remembering when a bit of a lot of people, which is real and hard. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
For
All
sure.
right. Well, that's our show, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Another late night news. Venessa, you want to take us out with the magic words, please?
Yes, because you guys know it's always time to go indie now.